But we're all here now, and just to say, later on in the session, if you want to ask any of the panelists a question, there's a microphone right here at the middle of the auditorium here. Rebecca, can I start with you?
Ready.
So how, well, I mean, it's just that when we need to build batteries, we've got to dig stuff up out of the ground.
Yes.
Or we can use recycled materials, which we can get onto later. It's become an obsession of mine because I've only just understood this at a very late age, that everything that human beings touch, create, move, change, eat,
Absolutely.
is either dug up or grown. And I was convinced there was another thing we do, but there is everything we use is dug up or grown.
Well, exactly, and even the stuff that we grow, we learn the process in a plant that's made out of stuff we dug out of the ground. I didn't like that these two grow trees. They're not. They're not in this fashion. So, yeah, my job is to understand where on earth these metals are, and obviously in the context of this panel, we talk about batteries. How we get them out of the ground, and how do we do that without, with a minimal impact on the environment? Biota, air quality, soil quality, and yeah, that's cool.
Just one of the things I just thought of this morning when I was reading through these notes, is probably, I'm trying not to go off topic, but I'm just intrigued, I've done a TV series where we looked at various aspects of activities. One of them was landfill. It was garbage.
Yes.
Disposal,
yeah.
And that we saw this massive hole in the ground, which was I think a limestone quarry, which was then filled with garbage over 50 years, and then topped off with soil, and it's now a hill.
Yes.
What was a big hole is now a hill. And then we recently done a program about mining on Fully Charged Show, and the hole was gargantuan in Canada.
Yes.
Does that ever get filled in? That's my simple question. When a hole's that big, can we fill it in?
I mean, it's a good question. With mines that are that big, were often started way before environmental regulation was a thing.
Yeah.
And are often in jurisdictions that regulations still aren't. Obviously, Canada is a huge exception. The regulations here are pretty tight. Modern mines that are in exploration, going into production, the requirements for closure and post-closure are night and day, right? To the 18th, 19th, 20th century.
Yeah.
So yes, there's holes, or more often than not now, underground mining. They are mitigated.
Right.
And as an environmental services firm, our job is to predict the water quality modeling that's going to happen, how that's going to change, and then what you need to put in place to make sure that doesn't happen.
Can we get louder?
Oh yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Can you hear me okay now?
Yeah, just need a little bit closer. Yeah. Ken, we've actually covered this topic a couple of times today about recycling batteries, second life batteries. Just a project I just want to quickly mention in the UK, which I think is very intriguing, which is JLR are now involved in a process of literally taking batteries out of iPace, and they do nothing to it. They take out the whole pack, they slide it into a system in a container, they plug in a couple of wires, and that becomes a battery pack. It's got its own inverter built into the pack, which is really intriguing. They're still only using their prototype vehicles and their test vehicles. But that was struck me as a really good way of doing that, rather than stripping the battery down, repackaging it, the cost and the materials of that. But is that something that is advancing rapidly and manufacturers are thinking about, that second life?
I don't know if manufacturers are thinking enough about that, because there are challenges with that. I believe we had a guest on from Moment Energy here in BC, and they're doing exactly that.
Right.
So they don't strip it down to the cell level. They just take modules, build a case in, plug in the modules, and then build up the software for that. So that is going to be key to the sustainability question.
Yeah.
Recycling is important, but we need to get as much life out of that battery as possible before it goes to recycling.
But it is becoming now, I think, that level of understanding of quite the capacity that will be available. When I was talking recently to Tesla, they've sold over 2 billion Tesla Model 3s to date, well over 2 million. They're selling them. That's a lot of if you add up what that turns into in gigawatt hours, it is gigawatt hours rather than megawatt hours.
That's right. It's going to be key to the renewable energy, solar and wind. We have to capture it, but we also have to store it.
Yeah.
So the repurposing, or what we call the industry second life batteries, is going to be suited to that.
Yeah. I'm glad, oh God, we mentioned this earlier on because we did Sandy and I did a panel earlier on, but I think this is important because, you know, I spent 10 years of my life working on a scrapyard, making a TV show, so I saw the colossal quantity of discarded machines, you know, they're piled high and miles wide. It's really how it compares, what we're trying to do now with batteries and everything, how that compares with the way we recycle ICE cars. I actually think that probably the automotive recycling is now quite an advanced industry. You know, not of traditional combustion cars. I mean, we're quite good at ripping them apart.
Yeah, we are very, very good at that. And the modern recycling, if the car is going to be recycled, the modern recycling basically strips the battery out and it does what they normally do. The battery is the one object that they really and truly want to get their hands on. Now, eventually there's going to have to be a different type of recycling because most every car company now is going to mega and giga castings for the lower part of the car. Obviously, that aluminum is worth a whole lot more than sheet metal. I mean, sheet metal is free. Nobody even wants the stuff. But that aluminum, that can be reused really easy.
Right.
The melting temperatures are lower. In a lot of cases, if they know what the chemical composition is of the alloy, they'll mount that separately so that they don't destroy the alloy conditions. And like I say, it's a difference between like a penny a pound and maybe $2.
Right.
So that will change the recycling process for automobiles in the future.
Yeah. Because I mean, it was one of the things early on in the history of electric vehicles, which isn't very long, was that sort of casual throwaway thing. Oh, we'll be throwing these batteries into landfill after 3 years. And I mean, even at the time when I hadn't got an answer and I hadn't really to go, I went, it doesn't really make sense because I know they're quite expensive. I've got these gold bars, they're worn out, I don't want them, I'm going to throw them into landfill. You know, it's just not very, there's always a daft
But
notion.
actually, a catalytic converter is basically a gold bar
Yeah.
for real.
Yeah.
And you watch how quickly those come out of a car before anything else.
Yeah.
So if you're looking at a nice vehicle, I need that catalytic converter in my hands right now, or a pup. There are several different, but they've got precious metals in it.
Yes.
They're worth some money.
Well,
Yeah.
I think there's quite a lot of vehicles in the UK where the catalytic converters removed while it's parked on the street, not necessarily by a fully
Yeah.
a fully trained mechanic. Zarko, what about when I casually say, oh, batteries will be recycled? That's a very easy thing to say. It's quite a complicated thing to actually do.
Well, yeah, our company's been working on that since 2016 here in Vancouver. We developed our process in 2016, right? And you know, if I save some of those news articles, it was always at the bottom of the news article, recycling is not economical or nobody's gonna do it. I mean, we were doing it and scaling it, and now we're just at that commercial scale-up ready stage. And when we think about how you define recycling, I think there's that misconception of there's recycling of taking the EV battery pack and shredding it up into materials known as black mass. But what we're really focusing on is actually taking the valuable lithium, nickel, manganese, and cobalt and actually making it into a usable product again. And that's a very difficult part that I would say where we've been perfected and actually taken our material, sent it to other companies who've made new cells out. But I just also want to go back to a point we were talking about. You know, we have a booth here as well, so we have a lot of people come up and talk about, you know, it's going to be great work that you guys are going to do in the future. Because everybody's thinking, well, electric vehicles are starting to come out right now, you know, so we're going to need recycling later. But right now where we need the most recycling is actually when you're making the battery itself. A lot of these gigafactories can experience scrappage rates of 30%.
Wow.
Because the quality of the material needs to be perfect. They're not going to put it, quality assurance isn't going to put that battery in an EV because that EV is going to have that could potentially catch fire on it. So a lot of these cells actually get thrown out before they even go into a consumer product. And it's a huge volume of material that can be recycled. I think Benchmark Mineral said in 2025, 78% of the recyclable material will actually just be the manufacturing scrap.
Regen manufacturing.
Yeah.
I did not know that. That is a very high figure. Because now we're producing billions of those batteries, so 30% it's some truckloads.
Yeah, and then you can think of it as like a strategic opportunity for these companies where, well, why don't they take their own scrap, have the technology that can recycle it, like we're developing, and then reintroduce that finished product back. That's what's called a truly circular supply chain.
Yeah. And I mean, is that one of the things that we've had? A question that came up today is, have we got enough materials to make the batteries we need? And we would often refer to Benchmark Mineral Intelligence in the UK. It do seem to be doing a pretty good job of assessing.
They're a very well known and
Right. And are they a trusted source of information?
Yes.
Right.
Benchmark Minerals, Fast Markets, there's quite a few out there.
Right. But I mean, from your standpoint, do you think we got enough copper?
Well, the copper fact that blows my mind is that we will need the equivalent amount of copper that we find in all of human history in the next 25 years to meet the demands for the energy transition that we're talking about at a bare minimum.
And there were sort of things like copper bracelets from the Iron Age. I mean, from a long time ago.
Yes,
We've been digging up copper for a long time.
And naturally, humans as a species, we do the easiest thing first. So we've dug out all the easy copper mines.
Right.
And now we've got to find the stuff that's deeper in the ground, the stuff that's harder to get out. So ultimately the supply of material will be limited by what we can get out of the ground at an economic rate, because capitalism, we have to make money when we're getting the stuff out of the ground. But yeah, I think going back to the title of this panel, is it ethical, sustainable, recyclable? I always have a fundamental issue with sustainable with respect to metals, because there is a finite amount of lithium atoms on this planet. And so, we have to bring online new projects faster than we've ever done it before. And we need to recycle, what's already been made available. And hopefully we will have enough to meet the demands in the short to medium term. But the transition that we're talking about and the amount of materials needed, we've never had that before. There is no precedent for finding 500% more lithium in the next 40 years to beat these cars. Like lithium, the lithium battery is 30 years old. So I am the same age as the lithium battery. And 30 years ago, lithium was such a small market. It was used for creases, healthcare products, and so on. 2030, 95% of the lithium market will be batteries, and that's just added value into that industry. So everything has to scale up in terms of your processing, your refining, you're getting materials offline, and that has indirect impacts as well that I think are often not thought about, is the life cycle of that material. I need sulfuric acid to turn my lithium rock into something that these guys can put in a battery. But there's also this high sulfuric acid involved. So, there are a huge number of limiting steps, and everything has to scale up in order to get that material into the battery. So when people ask me that, do we have enough? Like, it's not just if you have enough, it's do we have the infrastructure to get it from the ground to the manufacturer in the time that we're talking about.
And Ken, I mean, what is, the bell that's ringing in the back of my mind when I hear that from Becky is, we need to use it again. You know, we cannot afford to throw this stuff away. We've lived in a society that's thrown stuff away with wild abandon for the last 100 years.
Absolutely. And I hear a lot, it's a lot about new. What's new?
Yeah.
Let's make new out of the ground. There's a lot of great new cars. I love new cars. I love driving new cars. But they're also very expensive. And they have potentially very long life. And they will, every car ages. Every car starts out new and shiny that ends up in somebody's front yard and you force sales just to get rid of it. And we don't want to end a life of a vehicle prematurely, because we're taking a green car and making it less green if we do that. So we need to, that when it comes down to the price point, that someone can come and afford and buy that used car and get it repaired economically, to be assured that they can do that. And I believe we will, but there's some question marks around in the reuse of that.
Yeah. No. Yeah. I mean, the one, I don't know if any of you have seen it, but we did do a show with Apple Computer when they had a new machinery that breaks down iPhones. And then I was slightly dubious about going to see it, so it's not really our remake.
Daisy or something?
Daisy, yeah, Daisy. She's called Daisy. She's a very cute robot. She's got very little arms that break up iPhone. When we heard that there's 1.2 billion iPhones that have been sold, and the combined materials in that are on a scale we can't imagine. When you go into the facility and there are bins the size of a car that are full of just the little bit that goes zzz in your phone when you get a phone call, that little thing's got rare earth materials in it. And you see one and you go, well, it's such a microscopic amount, is it worth it? When you see 70 tons of them, which is what we saw, and suddenly that material makes it, and their stated aim, and we're going to hold them to it, is that by 2025 they will use no more freshly mined cobalt. They will only use cobalt they've already used in their phones, which is a kind of spite. So in a sense, when I went along to this thing going, why are we doing this with a bloody phone? It's not our thing. To the end of it, I went, that has got to be what's happening in the future.
Yeah, I mean, other mobile phone manufacturers do it as well.
Yeah.
I'm not an Apple person, I like myself, but they're new phones.
You love that machine because it's ripping up my phone. You hate it.
But they have, 30, even the current phones that have 30% recycled materials in, and your phone has 2/3 the periodic table in, which I think people often forget, and this is
it's 2/3 of all the materials on the periodic table.
and it's the tungsten, it's the rare earths, it's the gold that people don't think about, because there's a huge disconnect between what we own and where it comes from. But if you took a landfill full of laptops and phones and stuff, which do exist, that is the richest metal deposit in the world. It's it would be better to mine that than it would to mine fresh rock, but we don't have the processing abilities to do that.
I just want to remind you, if anyone has a question for our audience, I'm sure somebody does. I think there's a question. Are you coming towards us to help? Oh, well done, sir.
Walking with purpose.
Yes.
Hello. And I'm just wondering.
No, you're not on at the moment, is it? Can we have that mic on? Is that? It's on. Should be on now, sir.
Hello.
Well, very good.
I'm just wondering, some battery manufacturers for cars are looking at sodium-ion batteries instead of lithium-ion to mitigate fire risk. I was just wondering, how do you see the economics of the recycling that?
I mean, I don't. Yes, either Sandy or
Yeah, I mean, we get this question a lot, right? I think a few years ago when solid-state batteries started coming out, there was like, can you recycle solid-state batteries? There's always kind of that question, but you just really look at where's the capital going to right now, right? There's billions being poured into building large lithium-ion battery manufacturing facilities with specific chemistries, and the more they do that, the cost of making a lithium-ion battery is also going to come down, and it just, I'm sure sodium-ion is showing potential, but it's not going to wipe out lithium-ion from the planet, right? And I mean, lithium-ion, I think it's 30 years old. It's going to need to be recycled now, and just like maybe another company or our company will continue innovating and do sodium ion as well, but we're really focused on lithium ion at first.
I would add to that as well for the battery longevity for the repair. So I know that they are making innovations to make these much more stable. For instance, I know Tesla puts in a type of a glue or a pink glue, which makes repair much more difficult. So I get that they have to manufacture things with safety in mind, but I don't think they do enough to manufacture with repair in mind. We have to get away from the mindsets of just replace it with the new. And so I think we could do a lot more work and work with the OEMs towards that goal. Thank you.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think from the fundamental chemistry point of view, whilst lithium and sodium, sit in the same part of the periodic table, the lithium can provide much more power, per weight or whatever on battery, and so sodium's easier to get out of the planet because we do it all the time. We eat it on our chips and our fries. So, you'll probably see it being used and recycled, but maybe in a slightly different industry to batteries in the short to medium term. I'm a fan. Out of 10.
I'd like to just take a small step backward. Sodium ion batteries have show problems. That's the good news. But there isn't a whole lot of money to invest in them for right now. And quite frankly, as Orca said, it could be long before the price is going to be impossible to beat with lithium. One of the things that I'd like to try and drop back to a little bit is something that the Chinese do that we do not do. So you were talking about cell phones and recycling and whatnot. We have a lot of circuit boards and whatnot that when they get to the wrecking area, the scrap yards, they don't do anything. They just throw it in a big heap and crush it up. China does not do that. They take those circuit boards and they heat them up. It's called COTS, cooked on the stove. And in essence, what they do is they heat those components up. The components come free, and you can reuse them. They don't die. The little circuit board stuff, okay, maybe isn't any good anymore, but the components on that substrate are. We should really look at what the Chinese are doing.
Thank you. Can we get the next question, please?
Thank you. I'm wondering what the ethical part is regarding mining is considered, in particular in First Nations lands. And just speaking before about the need for minerals, right now, currently, we're mining 7 million tons of different minerals between copper and lithium and gold. By 2040, it's forecasted that it's going to be $28 million. 28 million tons. And we are transitioning away from the every year or total amount of fossil fuels, which is 15,000 million tons. So, for comparison.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
To talk on the ethics, which we haven't spoken about in detail, and actually that is almost typical of the industry, is that it's an afterthought, which is incredibly frustrating. But I don't want to speak out of turn. I don't work in stakeholder engagement. I do know a lot of people who do. What I find great about that is the people who are involved in stakeholder engagement really care. The people who are actually on the ground, making a difference, engaging with the community, trying to ensure that they're involved in projects. And again, I'm new to Canada, so I'm not as familiar with the Canadian system. But they're actively involved in engaging, getting people who are employed within the mines, working to get what's known as a social license to operate. If you don't have a social license to operate as a mine, you're not going to get invested now. And so we are seeing a shift. It is taking time, much like everything in the mining industry. That governments are pushing for better engagement, better regulation for both the social and environmental aspect of mining. And then you've also got investors pushing, which again, it frustrates me that it has to be the investors to make a stand before mining companies change, but that's where they get their money from.
Yeah.
And so you do see it with mines who aren't producing yet, because it takes 10 to 30 years to get a mine up and running. But if you flash forward to 20 years time, that whole engagement with local stakeholders, be it First Nations in Canada, like just locals in the UK and mine I was working at previously, it will be fundamentally different. It is fundamentally different. But I think that it's important that as the public, we continue to push the governments, because they ultimately make the regulations to make sure that this continues. Because whilst there are people within the mining industry who will go above and beyond, like any industry, a lot of people will do the bare minimum. And as long as the bare minimum is acceptable to us as a society, then something's going right. So.
And I can't help, I never want to use it as an excuse, but I just want us to remember we've all benefited hugely from the use of fossil fuels, and I've never had this discussion about the extraction, the transportation, and the refining of fossil fuels. I never hear that. When you read an article in an automotive magazine or see a TV series about cars, they never talk about the fuel that is used or where it comes from or the ethical dimensions of using that fuel. That is just totally ignored. And the only reason I want to mention it is because we've been really messing up parts of the world with our oil extraction for generations without a second thought. And we totally ignore it.
Yeah, I think it's good we're having this conversation, but I think also a little bit of education, hopefully everybody here has read Tesla Master Plan 3 and not just the kind of little highlights, because tucked away in page 173 somewhere there's a slide on recycling, which is, I'd love to see something like that, but what they're really showing is there's going to be this need for mining, but then coming in the few decades, like 2040, 2050, you're going to have this tipping point where now all the new material coming into new batteries is going to be the recycled material. And we already see that in the lead acid battery recycling industry, right, where there's this growing demand for lead acid batteries, but a lot of it, the majority of it, is supplemented with old recyclable class batteries.
We've got time for one more question, so I'm getting the look. Sorry for the rest of you. Yeah, sorry, we've run out of time.
So last year I read and was quite excited about lithium extraction from seawater, and I was wondering if any of you knew that it had scaled up yet, and if it is going to scale, when might we start seeing this happen?
So yeah, that just happens to be what I've been doing for the last 2 years. So yeah.
That's good. That's good. There's someone here that knows.
I'm not an engineer, but I talk to them a lot. Getting lithium out of water, we do it already. We do it in South America. So I'm going to assume everyone's got a phone near. 50% of the lithium in this space has probably come from Chile. Right. It sat in an evaporation pond for 2 years. Sun evaporated it off and turned it into a battery. And
that originally, the water that was there is seawater.
So that's a brine material.
Right.
So seawater, specific to your seawater question, economically, seawater is down here. Groundwater and freshwater lithium brines from Alberta. If anyone's been to Alberta, there's EVfriendly lithium out there. They just commissioned their pilot plant, which is amazing news, following them for a while. They're taking waters that are actually cold for, oil fields. And that brine is full of salts and it's full of lithium. And so yes, maybe not seawater, but yes, you will start to see brines like that being produced. South America, Chile recently said that we're not going to green light any new evaporation ponds because you're using up our fresh water, which is true because you're literally evaporating the fresh water off in an environment where it rains once every 2 years. So we're looking at, can you take that water, can you pass it through essentially a water treatment plant, which we do every day for people who drink desalinating water. It's the same functionality, slightly different.
then you can use that water again.
Yes,
You
you
don't
put
lose
it back
the
in the
water.
ground. So what you do is you bring the water up, you take the lithium out, you put it back down.
Right.
You know, you've got, I've oversimplified it there, but obviously, you know, you've got no land impact, minimal water use. You can actually, when you need water within the process, you can create desalinated water with an RO and cleaner. And so environmentally, that has a hugely beneficial impact. What is taking the time to answer your question of, you know, when will we see it happening? We're very much at, I'd say, the pilot demonstration stage on a global scale at the moment. There is a commercial plant that's been running technically in South America for a few years, kind of not spoken about as much, but it's the classic technology curve. It takes time to get a technology from the bench scale to a commercial scale. Normally that happens behind closed doors, and you know, a company just comes out with a lovely product that's like, this works, take this. But the lithium industry, EV industry, much like, dare I say it, COVID, is happening on a global stage with people watching. And so at the moment you have dozens of companies at that pilot stage. Some of them will make it, but you know, they're singing about it with the rooftops because lithium's a good buzzword and we know we need lithium. So I think give it, not much short, I'm going to give it 5 to 10 years before you see like multiple commercial plants running.
Brilliant. And we've now gone 22 minutes, seconds over time. I'm really sorry, sir, we can't do your question. I'm so sorry. We really have to round up there, or we messed the whole there. Can we have a big round of applause? Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.